your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all with his name. We call him the chief. The chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know what do they call him? We call him the chief. Chief. You're damn right we do.
I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Hey, good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on YouTube's Pop Culture Minefield. You can also find Pop Culture Minefield on Rumble. They have a Facebook page and they have a Twitter feed, so check them out. They do shows every day of the week, almost every day of the week, and I do the cop shows on Tuesdays. God, I've been doing this now, I think, approaching 3 years, and we're having a lot of fun. But today's show, I wanted to do a show with Robert Duvall because he recently passed away. He's got a huge amount of work, a huge amount of work, excellent work. Obviously, you remember The Godfather and all that stuff. But we do cop shows here, and I wanted to do one where he was a cop, and I settled on the movie True Confessions, which has a lot of really interesting themes, which we'll get into with my guest. But before we jump into the movie, I just want to remind you guys to support the Los Angeles Mission. Los Angeles Mission, downtown Los Angeles, been doing their good work for over 85 years. Feeding and meeting the needs of the homeless. Just go to losangelesmission.org and make a donation today. There's a lot of interesting things going on with the homelessness crisis in LA and the policies. I mean, I did do a show recently on how Housing First is failing us. That was my last show with Briefing with the Chief with KGRA, and I brought somebody on from the Independent Institute, and we talked about how Housing First is failing and the direction that we needed to go. So it was a great conversation. I also did relaunch my Briefing with the Chief on my own without KGRA, so you can find that on YouTube. So at Briefing with the Chief. I don't do it live anymore. I used to do all my shows live, so now I record them and then post them around 3 o'clock every Wednesday. I'll do a long format show. And I also am experimenting with the short format where it's 10 to 15 minutes on subjects and on different subjects. And that is going pretty well. But you can find that one at Briefing with the Chief on YouTube. And we just launched the Rumble channel. Just launched our Rumble channel. So if you prefer Rumble, you can go to there. Same show name, Briefing with the Chief, and find us there and check out the shows. And we're working, I've been contacted about getting on iHeartRadio and Spreaker for the show. So they're changing the podcasting into radio broadcasting format, and hopefully I can work out an equity share. That would be kind of fun. But anyways, if you go to those shows, make sure you follow me or subscribe, whatever the platform requires. You can also find me at X. There you can see my handle right there under my name at LSD Jordan. I do post about a wide variety of things, and there's so much going on these days. You really got to pay attention, keep what's going on. I really do like the X platform. But today's show, like I said, is we're going to do True Confessions, and I have retired Chief Ralph Ornelas with me today, a Westminster Chief, but he's also retired commander from the LA County Sheriff's Department, my old alma mater. Hi, Ralph. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, everybody in the audience, and Martine.
There is a lot going on these days, right, out at the news.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about, between LA County sheriff's election, the State of the Union, what happened in Mexico a couple of days ago, what's going on with Nancy Guthrie, what's going on with ICE in numerous cities. I mean, you take your pick. I mean, you could have a whole day conversation about any of those topics.
I know. So there's these things called Spaces on X, and because I use my real name and title, I get invited up whenever there's a subject that they're talking about. And the whole Mexico thing is just the last several days they were talking about it because one of them was a Latino. He's I think he's from San Gabriel Valley. He runs a show a couple times a week, and I just lay it out there. I lay out all the whole debt bondage, how the cartels worked, how they monetized the whole immigration thing, how it made them billions. And the same thing for fentanyl, and how Trump has put a stop to that. And I just think that creates disruption down there. And of course, Trump is still putting pressure. He's blowing up boats coming out of Venezuela, and he's putting on pressure on Mexico with the tariffs. I mean, think about it. Everything they produce, they got to pay extra on because of the cartels' trade with fentanyl. Same with Canada. So this was going to happen given Trump's trade policies, but it kind of has to happen. It kind of has to happen. Go ahead.
Absolutely, I believe this. It's like when I was working street gangs in a smaller scale than the cartels. You have to have the triangle. You have to have suppression, prevention, intervention, and I believe that right now with President Trump's doing, is putting the pressure on the Mexican government, the Latin American government, actually, after what took place with Maduro. And, also it's putting China on notice because we all know the analogs and the precursors are coming from the northern province of China into two ports, the Manzanillo port in the north in the state of Colima, and then the Lázaro Cárdenas port in Michoacan. So, and the audience and Pat and Martin, if you don't know it, the Manzanillo port is run by the Sinaloa cartel, and the southern port's run by the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. And so guess what? There's a war going on, and with El Mencho being taken out by thank God for our intelligence component of our country. Guess what? Now they have a big, a disruption in the chain of command. So now we got to see what the Mexican government's going to do.
All right, we just got called the old guy stream. All right, Kerwin. Okay, welcome to the show, Kerwin. But that's not how to win friends here. Yes, Ralph and I both have the same look, but I don't know. I think I'm looking pretty young. I'm looking fit. I'm working out. Old guy stream.
Well, okay. let me tell Kerwin something, and the audience, to keep young every day. I do 100 straight push-ups in one set. Okay. I want to tell you something, and I'm on a 90-day program of 100 straight push-ups. So, Kerwin, if you want to take a photograph of you doing push-ups, I'll counter that with you.
Yeah, we're having fun with you, Kerwin. And, thank you. Welcome to the show. Yes, we are old guys, but here's the thing. One of the reasons why I like doing the show, and Ralph told me that he's just doing some radio work as well. And it's with age comes wisdom. Unfortunately, our society doesn't always value that. Old is seen as, my daughter-in-law's grandfather just passed away.
I'm sorry.
Sharp all the way to the end. He had been in the Rangers, dropped into Korea just as the war ended. So I planned and I parachuted into Korea, but we didn't fight anybody because the war ended as we parachuted in. So he came back to the States and joined the sheriff's search and rescue team, and also joined JPL, helped to develop some technology using the buoys in the sea and satellites to track weather patterns. I mean, this is interesting stuff. And he was sharp as a tack as he was telling me all this stuff. And when he, was working as a deputy and all that other stuff, interesting guy. I tell this story, but so when because he lived up in Altadena, when the Eaton Canyon fire came, he had a hobby where he would, he would fiddle with radios, right? And he was listening to both the sheriff and fires. And the sheriff, he couldn't get everything because it's encoded, but he was listening to fire, and he realized the fire was coming to his house. So here he is. I think at that time he was like 92 or 93. And he looks out and sees, oh, yeah, this is going to get here a lot quicker than people think. So he goes and wakes up his neighbor who can't walk, not ambulatory, right? Takes him 20 minutes to get his neighbor loaded in the car, drives him down to a place where his neighbor can get taken care of, calls his son, doesn't go back to his house. Whole neighborhood's wiped out. House is wiped out. So here he is in his 90s, realizing there's a problem, and saves his neighbor, doesn't just leave, saves his neighbor, takes his neighbor with him, and then passes away, a year and a half later. So I mean that, age is just a number, right? So hey, Kerwin, so I just told you a story about an old guy saving lives all the way to the end.
Pat, if I may,
Yeah.
last week, a week ago today, I was at Eleanor Roosevelt High School doing 5 presentations on the dangers of fentanyl to high school students. And in the last class, about 35 students in there, this young lady, her name just happened to be Brooklyn, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, Greenpoint. And she goes, "What does it feel like to be almost 69?" And audience, sometimes I have to really analyze and think about that, because sometimes I don't believe I'm going to be 69 here in a couple of months. And it's because I think it's all your spirit, intent, and how you carry yourself,
Yeah.
and keep it in shape, and and also I think for me, I think it's always my love for people, meeting people and engaging people and talking to people, because I think we always learn something for like right now today, you and I talking, Martine, and listening to some of Kerwin and stuff. Something, you always pick up some pearl of wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank Andy for coming back to the show. He's been on the show before. And Kerwin, we are having some fun with you, and we know it was meant as a compliment, and we do appreciate you visiting the show. But today's show, we're going to do True Confessions. Now, this is an interesting, because the old guy died. One of the old guys died, Robert Duvall. I didn't get a picture of him, but a lot of great work. He's got a great body of work. And we do cop shows here, or crime shows. I could have done The Godfather, but you know what? I go, I want to do something a little different. And I picked this one, and I'm glad I picked it because it's got a lot of interesting themes in it too. It's the relationship between brothers. It's facing. Apologies, Jens. I really meant the older guy's dream versus some 20-year-old. Yeah. That's right. Well, hey, you know what?
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Kerwin.
Hey, Kerwin, you can check me out at Briefing with the Chief, where I do political stuff too, and that one's a little more. Trust me, I got told to just go into retirement, Grandpa, on something I commented before, so I get it all the time. I'm glad you're retired. I get that too. So,
you should answer. That was my plan, but then I saw what you were doing.
Oh man, I get so my age becomes an issue. With these trolls all the time. But hey, this movie though, it has the religious themes, which I think is cool, and it's interesting because it has both brothers as we get through this facing a moral dilemma and how they do it, and that dilemma actually it comes out right. They in the end it works out, but the moral dilemma is also on the part of the priest, so Dez, played by Robert De Niro, and I thought, wow, this is really a good, because I do have some somebody a priest in my family, and we talked about this stuff. The mere fact that he was a Monsignor, we'll get into that, what Monsignor's supposed to be for, the rank of Monsignor in the church, and it was interesting because it mirrored up with what my uncle told me about ambitious priests and in the hierarchy. And when you think of the Catholic Church, it's just like any other, right? Pride is one of the deadly sins, and pride was one of the things that was an issue here, right? Very interesting, and a lot of great people in the show. But let me interesting. So True Confessions was released in 1981. It's American neo-noir crime film directed by Ulu Grosbard and starring Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall, two great actors. And of course, Robert Duvall passed away last week. And they're brothers. One is a priest, one is a detective, which kind of mirrors my family. My dad was a cop, one of his uncles was a cop, and one of his brothers was a cop, and the other brother was a priest. So typical Irish Catholic stuff, right? And the book was True Confessions, written by John Gregory Dunn, loosely based on the Black Dahlia. So you see, they do kind of lay out the body, and you realize when they see the body set up that it is based upon the Black Dahlia, but it doesn't really. It's very loosely based upon it. It just kind of inspires the story, but it doesn't really. True Confession is one of the rare. rarest of films you get to talk about and analyze after you've seen it. Gambit. It's I just wanted a film with Robert De Niro that involved crime, and then I watched it and I go, wow, there's so many cool themes in this movie, and we'll get into some of them. So, what'd you think of the movie, though, Ralph?
I loved it because of the three actors actually, Charles Durning, Robert Duvall, and Robert De Niro. And actually, there's a lot of great actors in it, but I like the twists and turns. What I really enjoyed was the interaction when those two any actors got together, like Burgess Meredith and De Niro, walking through the property of the church and having this conversation about what it is to be a priest.
Yeah.
The interaction between Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall, even when Robert Duvall goes into the confession booth and is apologizing to his brother. Charles Durning, the interaction between Robert De Niro and Charles Durning, and then Charles Durning and the confrontation between Robert Duvall and him. And it goes on, and even the eminence, and in the car, leaving the Mexican celebration down across the street from the Union Station. Every one of those, I enjoyed the acting of that. So it kind of, but then the other part of it is that we all know is that they didn't tie it up at the end totally clearly at the end of the movie. But for me, I put that aside because I truly enjoyed the acting from all these great actors and actresses. Even the mother who was laid in bed, her last name is Nolan. I remember her playing in Columbo back in the early 70s, so they had so many great people in this movie. So to me, it was, I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, so even De Niro's Duvall's partner in this, was a great character actor, Kenneth McMillan, I believe was. And
yes.
And then Burgess Meredith, he's old Hollywood, right? He's golden age Hollywood. And here he is in the film, and I think I remember him from the was it the Prayers of Saint Bernadette, or remember that old one where he plays he ends up playing the older priest, the Prayers of Saint Bernadette or something like that, and it's black and white. And I think ever since he did that movie, whenever they need an old priest, he gets cast as the guy.
Remember him in Rocky. He was the trainer for Rocky, so he could play anything. Burgess Meredith. He's really a great actor. He was even in the movie with oh my God, it was what was it? The Pegasus and the first movie that did that. He was like this Roman or time. Yeah, I forget the name of the movie, but he could play anything. That guy.
Yeah,
anything.
Classic. What did you think of the movie, Martine?
I liked, but the parallels with the Black Dahlia case. It had me. Well, is this the Black Dahlia, or is another thing? Is based on they are using the characters to the case around this fictional story.
Yeah, they created a fictional story around the Black Dahlia. Yeah, but
but it isn't, because the as I recall, the Black Dahlia wasn't solved. Well,
no,
you don't see that they solved that case in this movie. They just point to primary suspect and the scandal, and that's all.
Yeah. They kind of, yeah, you're right. And Ralph kind of mentioned they don't really close all the loops on this thing. But it's pretty much implied that she was killed by the pornographer, and partly to shut her up because of all the wealthy folks. Hey, let's start rolling. I love those that question morality, especially when it's questions police morality, like Serpico or Copland. And this one was really the questioning of the morality of the priest. That was really the paramount thing of this film. Duvall was already his character was already kind of morally bankrupt. He was a bag man for prostitution stuff, and he was questioning his morality, and he wanted to come around. So that is true. But the big one is the priest working with those same people that he knew was scumbags. This was Jack Armstrong. That's Charles Durning's character, and and then his own dilemma, because I mean, priests have a different view of sin and guilt, and it's implied in the movie that Dez, which is De Niro's character, is prideful, which is not a good thing, and as being a priest, right? And it's really about them both dealing with their own, moral issues, right? That's what really the story is about, and the Black Dahlia just kind of helped the case. Just, I think it just gathers your interest in Martine. I think they could have done anything. You could have made up a fictional story, but that one kind of, if you're selling a movie, you want to say loosely based upon the Black Dahlia. It's probably worth, I don't know, a couple $100 million or $100 million at the box office. You never know. So
loosely based on a picture of a of a newspaper talking about the Black Dahlia.
Yeah. So I do, it's interesting that so we both know Robert Duvall and Robert De Niro as old men now, right? But this movie, they got to show them as young men and old men. And it's interesting how they portray them as old men here, and how they actually looked as old men when they got older, right? So I kind of like that. I don't know, what do you think, Ralph? It's kind of interesting. So Duvall, pretty close, but I don't think he had a lot of hair at the end, and they still show him with hair there. But and De Niro, same thing,
Pat, an audience, the part of this beginning part with Robert Duvall, took his hat off and he's looking down at his brother. Duvall looks like what he looked like when he was younger in the movie To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
When he played Boo.
Yeah.
And I look at it, I go, my God, his skin looked very pale and ash, and it reminded me the black and white, film of To Kill a Mockingbird. But Duvall is just a classic, great actor. And getting back to what you said about the script, here is a cop who, did some things in his beginning part of his career that were not in line with the cops supposed to be doing. And here is a priest that we always think priests are going to be doing always the right thing for the community, for their individuals, for their patrons that come into the church and stuff. And I think you said it, Pat. Duvall, De Niro in this movie playing Dez, he misused his power. And I think he wanted power. And I think he really wanted to be, just like you and I saw some people in the sheriff's department, they wanted that rank. I'm not sure if they really wanted for the real reasons.
Yeah.
They wanted to exude their own arrogance or the misunderstanding what it really is to have a certain rank. And so, it was really, I thought that part of the movie was very interesting, how it evolved and how it all came at the end.
Hey, James, Jameson. Oh, Jameson's, that's a good name. I love Jameson.
Me too.
I think I would say seduced by power for Dez.
Yes.
is more appropriate, right? That he liked the adulation. As we went up, we both retired as chiefs. As you go up, suddenly, your coffee's made, it's there, your car is cleaned up and gassed up every morning, and people want to hear what you have to say because you have power, right? You can control their careers, you can get them to where they want to go to some degree, and that can be intoxicating for some folks, and abused is what you're talking about. It gets abused and misused, right? And it is when it's, I forget what the quote goes, give a man, when you give somebody power, you really I see who they are underneath, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. And I don't want to say Dez was, this is like in the 40s and 50s, and in LA, I had to look it up. In LA, there was about, I think, 1.5 million people in LA at the time. And so we're talking about, in comparison today, much smaller. Everybody who was a mover and shaker kind of knew each other, that kind of thing, right? And the church was exploding in size. This is after World War II. We saw the explosion of Los Angeles after World War II, right? So this is as Mulholland was, getting the aqueducts into LA so it could grow, right? And and in terms of the police, yeah, they still had some morality issues because they were coming out of the 20s and 30s of corruption, right? When they formed the gangster squad, and finally, I forget, the Chief Parker took over and professionalized and made them a little more militaristic, and cleaned up their department, right? So a lot of these things are the backdrop to LA. And when we talk about a corrupt police department, we obviously there's some level of corruption in the church as well, and it manifests in different ways. Like they're willing to accept money from bad people to expand the church, right? Not that they're necessarily doing the things themselves, but it's dirty money. I guess that's the best way. It's dirty money, and they're willing to expend to take it and turn a blind eye. I also love all these old cars, though, too. It's fun. It's fun watching these cars, having grown up in Detroit myself. But that's what it is. It's dirty money, and the church is taking it, and they're turning a blind eye, even though, and Des knows it, right? But so does the cardinal in charge, of the bishop, right? He knows, they know, and they turn a blind eye to it. But that's, you know what I was thinking of, Ralph, when I watched this movie. And Martine, did you ever hear of indulgences? An indulgence was what the church, prior to the Reformation, sold to the nobles. So you can buy an indulgence from the bishop, and the indulgence forgave all of your sins, no matter how bad they were. And so they would, the church, the bishops and the cardinals and the Pope would sell these indulgences to these rich nobles who engaged in a terrible behavior. And that was one of the things that inspired Martin Luther to, call out the Catholic Church, and it was a big part of the Reformation, right? And so what I kind of equated it to, if you understand that history and the Great Schism, I equated, so Des and the cardinal were, okay, give us the money for the new church. That's kind of an indulgence. What do you think?
Well, what I think with the eminence and Des started realizing that Jack Amsterdam was going to be exposed on some stuff, and that's when the indulgence to him was going to be cut loose, and because they had to cut loose because of the image of the church,
yeah,
and they were looking at for other means, other people to be able to invest. In fact, if you remember one scene in the locker room of golf, the one gentleman with the glasses standing up behind Robert De Niro, Des, and say, well, we could give him the layman's award for the Catholic Church, but let's maybe go to another company. So they already had a plan, because Des was not going to vacillate about cutting Jack loose, because they know Des knew something was coming down with Jack about this young lady.
Yeah,
he knew that. He knew that. So I hate to make this analogy, but it's like the Italian mafia. When they knew certain people were going to be a detriment, they disappeared.
They disappeared.
They disappeared.
It's funny when you say that. See the scene here. This is the party scene, right? And the music was very similar to the music in The Godfather.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Did you notice that, Martine?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, because in the Godfather, they were playing tarantellas and Italian music, and it is real Irish music.
No, this is you had kind of Italian theme to it that they were playing, and I thought it was, and then the whole party scene, and just was reminiscent of that scene. As was what I felt.
Same thing. Same thing here. Yeah. And I felt the same way.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of evil in the Godfather scene too, in a moment of celebration, and kind of it's the same thing here going on here. We got to kind of explain who Charles Durning's character is. Great character actor, Charles Durning. He's had some starring roles, but he's mostly a character actor, right? And he plays Jack Armstrong, so he is the big money guy for the church. Amsterdam, Jack Amsterdam. That's
like the city.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at these different names that they gave him. Why would he give him the name Amsterdam? And but yeah, it's but he's the mover and shaker. He's the one giving money to the church. Godfather 3 is based on the marriage of the mafia and the church. Yeah, it is. And there are those connections there. And but I just think when you go back at the indulgence in Martin Luther, the church has played this game, walked this tightrope. Sometimes not walking it tight. So clearly on the side of bad, and sometimes they're just walking the tightrope, and then sometimes you have leadership where they're purging that kind of stuff out. So they are constantly going through these cycles. But this is on a smaller level. This is the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, which at the time was probably pretty big. I mean, the first opening scene, Des was by his choice. When you find out, he went down to a archdiocese run by Burgess Meredith eventually, and outside of Palm Springs. And that's how big the Archdiocese of LA used to be, right? Even when LA started, right, Ralph, in 1850, went all the way to the Mexican border, right?
Yeah.
And so these are big areas, and but the Archdiocese, and it's interesting what I learned about the Catholic churches. Each bishop area, each what do they call them, archdiocese, it's kind of their own see. So it's not like a direct hierarchical relationship, right? Each bishop has their own. Once they're appointed, it's their see, and they run it, right? And they take guidance and instruction from the church, but it's not 100%. And I didn't know that. I thought it's not quite hierarchical as people would think, and it's more the Pope has influence, specifically on the real banking scandal involving the Vatican and affiliated banks. Yes, but did you know that, Ralph? It's my uncle explained that to me. It's like each archdiocese is run by the bishop, and they have almost unfettered authority.
They do.
Yeah,
they do. How I learned that later in life was when I was a captain of Men's Central Jail, and every Christmas, the Archbishop Gomez, we had a conversation, and we would talk in a sidebar before the sheriff gets there, and I would ask him questions, and basically he had the run just like Archbishop Mahoney did. They had the run of their, I'm going to use this term, regime.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the run of it, and all the monies and how they influenced with the political beings in the city or the county. And then they had all the other monsignors and priests, just like a chain of command. Yeah. They run it, and so just think about the power and authority of them. And I'll give you a little story if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I was a deputy in 1983. I get a call, the prowler call, and I park on a right angle and I walk in by myself. Remember, we had no handheld radios back then, and I go about 2 doors just east of this one street, and I see a dark object near a window, and I light this person up. The person comes down. I go, Father, what are you doing here? And I get the backup, and I sink the father in my back seat. And I knock on the door, and the lady who called about the prowler call, she lets me in, and she takes me to the bedroom where her son and her saw a dark object looking through the window. And so, long story short, I arrested this father for peeping Tom. Wow. And I book him at the station. Within an hour, the captain of the station responds to the station, telling me to 849B1, which means, everybody in the audience means, basically they're letting him go, And I told the captain, I'm not letting him go. And the captain goes, what? I said, I'm not letting him go. And the reason I did that is because a neighbor of mine here in Huntington Beach was molested repeatedly by a Catholic priest. And so I explained that to the captain, and the captain, I got to give him credit. He said, okay, Ralph, he 849B'd with him. But, the power, just think about the power and authority. When that priest made a phone call to the archbishop, it went to the sheriff, went right directly to the captain. Yeah. And so, that I don't know if people can understand, that's power.
Yeah.
That's power.
Yeah. See, I was in Georgetown. The priest noted that they were not under the Archdiocese of Washington, but they were directly to the Captain General of the Society of Jesuits of Rome, the Archbishop wasn't happy. They do have different elements within the church have more power, which is interesting. Like the Jesuits, it's interesting how they have more power. But you're right, Ralph, and I'm glad you did the right thing. And but there is a great deal of power. Because if you think about it, I mean, I don't know which sheriff that was, but think about it. So how many Catholics are in LA County, right? And the sheriff, he wants that vote, right? So and yeah, that's bad. Unfortunately I've not run into that situation myself. But they and the thing about it is Rome would say that's up to the bishop to a cardinal to work out those relationships, right? And I don't know, Martine, did you grow up Catholic? Were you part of the church at all?
No.
No. Okay.
No to both of them.
Huh?
Let's see. I've been to a Protestant school for years, then to a Catholic schools. In fact, a nun school. I spent many years in that one. But although my belief system is Christian,
Yeah.
I go under no denomination. I'm not part of a church. I think God is and Jesus are bigger than any church or organization.
I believe that too. And what I think is the interesting. I am a Catholic, and that's my faith, and I embrace it. But I do recognize it's about faith. It's about who you are, how you conduct yourself. It isn't necessarily about the rituals of faith. The rituals of your church help to keep you on a path, and that's kind of how I see it. But it's really about how you conduct yourself day to day is how I see it. And I think these two characters face this, right. Here's the scene where I think we've already had the scene where the priest died in the whorehouse. So
Yeah.
we already had that, and that's important because they see some ladies at the whorehouse, and this is where Robert Duvall connects with his Brenda, his a former lover who went to jail for running a whorehouse that he was the bagman for, right? So you see these backgrounds, but this is the part where we see the Black Dahlia inspiration. So they're investigating a homicide now, and they show it that the inspiration is clearly because they show the two different body parts, and then there's the whole argument about how the body should be transported by the coroner's office. I can't say I have any experience there. We always felt the coroners knew what they wanted to do, and nobody gave them instructions, right? But maybe it was a little less professional back then. First of all, okay, I got to ask you about the suits. What do you think, Ralph? I just think that was a time when they were dapper. Those guys, everybody dressed dapper and nice. What do you think?
I'll tell you, I love the hats. I love the suits. And in LAPD, my uncle came on LAPD in 1963, and they used to call the LAPD guys the Hat Squad, which was homicide and stuff like that. And I enjoy seeing that. The other thing, if you look at this right now, you see that rope is blocking off the crime scene. We progressed to yellow tape, but that's how they used to put a post on the ground, and they have the ropes to block it off. So, I mean, look how far we have come, from those days, and not only that, but how forensics and everything we do, it's amazing. But if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the part of Brenda, who is kind of the lover of Robert Duvall in this movie. I enjoyed that engagement in that room where the Father Mickey was dead, going on a second round with that prostitute.
Right.
But I enjoyed the verbiage and the dialogue between Brenda and Robert Duvall and his partner, and then the black lady who was a prostitute, and how Robert Duvall said, "Okay, did you give me everything back?" And he kind of was very forceful, and I could see that. He does such a great job in taking that part and make it become so realistic. And that's what I've always respected about him and as an actor.
Yeah, this is where he's jamming her for the money. Okay, you took the money. Where is it? And then he
Yeah.
gives her a little bit. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the 40s. Did he pocket that? That's
Oh,
did he pocket? What do you write? You think of that? And
to me, the best line comes from Duvall when he's radioing and say, "Yeah, I need all cases that are similar to this." It may take some time. He was cut in two. What do you think that it is a fashion?
Right, Martine. Yeah. I mean, there's not many cases probably people cutting
Yeah,
too, and
no,
yeah. That's a good point. A good point of that, Martine. But yeah, I mean, that's what made this movie. Even if they didn't tie it up in a nice bow at the end, it still what made the movie was the acting of all these great actors in this movie.
yeah, and there were. When I picked it, I didn't realize that we'd have Burgess Meredith. I didn't realize that we'd have, Kenneth McMitchell, who plays a cop in a lot of stuff, right? And then Charles Durning. I didn't realize
Yep.
that. Just a lot of good people. Even, I don't recall Brenda's the actress Rose Gregorio, but
Yeah.
she did a great job as well. I'm going through the list here of
James Hong. James
James
Hong.
yeah.
Hong. Yeah, he was just played the
He's still
coroner.
he's still alive.
I
He's like
know.
94 years
97.
old.
I recognize him from some movies too. But yeah, so this was a good ensemble, a good cast of people. And this guy sometimes you could mistake this guy for Charles Durning right away, but then you go, wait a minute, that's not Charles Durning. And then I had to
Right.
look him up, and I go, man, I've seen him in a lot of movies. And I just but
Pat, the movie McMillan, you just showed his picture, I always remembered him in, is The Pope of Greenwich Village with Mickey Rourke
yes,
and
yeah,
Julia Roberts' brother. I forget his name is Roberts, but I forget Eric Roberts. And he played a great part in that too.
yeah. But you get good actors like this, and they do a great. But because I think you did the 12 Angry Men with me, right,
Yeah,
Ralph? I think,
yeah,
and a lot of the movies now are blow 'em ups, that kind of thing, and you don't get this movies that are built on just the character interactions, right? I mean, they do accent this movie with old LA, the Union Station, Echo Park, and that kind of stuff. But it's well, there's the guy you just talked about, right?
yeah. But
um,
Pat, to your point, you just said about the acting and good dialogue. Like I said last week, here I am giving 5 classes on David Fentanyl. The young people today if you don't engage them and then really bring it out of them, they don't have that dialogue like we're doing right here, or have the acting, or even in real life. Everybody wants a text, and I think that's what's missing in our society today, is really dialogue between two people or a
right.
group of people.
Okay, so I got to ask about the uniforms of the church, right? So I grew up going to Catholic schools, and when the bishop showed up in their regalia, there was an expectation of respect that you had to give and how you conducted yourself. Everybody was quiet. It's an interesting thing. I was reading a book once, and it was about the organization. So it was about organizational behavior book, and how one corporation tended to hire people who were Catholic and went to Catholic schools because they were used to a hierarchical organization, right? They were used to people being in charge, and they liked that. And so it tended to target people who were Catholic and went to Catholic schools. But, I just look at the outfits, and, they are designed to elude the respect and power, right?
Intimidate.
It's interesting because, after the Second Vatican Council, that was in the 60s, right? They kind of softened their look. You saw the nuns, they loosen up the habits that they were wearing. Priests could soften their look a little bit. But I remember my kids were going to Catholic school, and we had a problem, and two of us fathers were going to talk to the principal, and it was this little short nun, and she was and I was going, and this other guy was going, and we get in there, and he had gone to that school. So as soon as he gets in front of the teacher, he melts. He was all talk outside, but so he kind of shrunk in and melted to everything she said. And I'm like, okay, I had to tell sister, this is my problem, right? And I lay it out just like I do business wise. And she says, we're taking care of it. You're absolutely right, But I just saw how this my friend completely changed when he got in front of somebody in the church wearing their their uniform, their habit, and how he, over the years, people are almost institutionalized to react a certain way to people in the church, and and I have that same respect too, but I understand it is an organization. These are people, and we need to get certain things out of our organization and hold them to expectations. But that happens, right? You get into the church, you get in the vestibule, you get in front of and you change, right? You react differently. Very much how people, when they see a bunch of uniform cops, same thing, same kind of act. What do you think, Ralph?
No, I agree with your premise, because where I grew up in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, St. Cecilia's Church, my mom's side of the family, Italian, they made the furniture for the church. My uncle Sammy did all the plumbing. And I got to tell you something, they literally, the community just basically honored, because of the uniform, the outfits, the garb. But I'll tell you the story real quickly. I was in the basement, marching in the basement back to class after lunch, and I turned to my left to say hello, say something to my cousin Matt, and a brother. You got priest, brother, Monsignor, and he slapped me open-handed in my right ear, and
Ouch.
I stayed the rest of the whole afternoon with my right ear blood in my ear. And when I walked home, it was only 2 blocks away, and my father saw me. My father ran to the rectory and wanted to choke out this brother, and
Yeah.
and the thing about it, most people, my mom's side of the family was trying to hold back my dad because of respect. My father says, "No way, nobody's going to hit my son like that." Thank God, never ruined my ear. But that goes to your point, Pat, that my mom's whole family didn't want my dad to respond to that, which was inappropriate behavior.
We got a good comment from James Jameson. So of course, good comment. Robert Priest De Niro, you looking at me?
Yeah, that's right.
That's pretty funny. But here's our 2 brothers. It's interesting, when you grow up as brothers, though, and one becomes a priest, it's like, you remember all the bad stuff that priest did when he was a kid, right? It's like, so it's just suddenly you get the inspiration to become a priest. Of vocation, I think, is what they call it, right? And you become a priest, and that relationship really doesn't change between brothers, right? You're still my brother, who was the idiot, that took my Hot Wheels or whatever it is, right? You're still that guy, and so you see this. I see a good close relationship between these brothers who are on a different side of a moral dilemma here. My friend went to a Catholic school, and the nuns were evil.
Well, Gary
Oh my
says the
God,
same
we're
thing.
bashing on the church here.
Gary says the same thing, but my experience was absolutely different.
Yeah.
Of course, there was this 1 or 2 nuns that, oh my God, they were strict and stringent, but the rest, they were lovely.
Yes.
And they were funny.
Yeah. Most of the people I interacted in Catholic schools for 12 years were really great. I was, believe it or not, I had a medical issue when I was in 1st grade. I couldn't hear, swallowed tonsils and had noise. And so I was, wasn't paying attention, looking out the window, and I get the knuckle wrap on the head, kind of thing, and pay attention and all this other stuff. And I guess when you're hard of hearing, you open your mouth a lot. So I must have looked like an idiot with my mouth gaping open. And then they found out that I needed a surgery, and that I had they were talking about even holding me back, and my mom wouldn't let it happen. But that ended up being my teacher for the 3rd grade, and she was the sweetest person after that. I think she felt guilty. So I think she felt a little bit of guilt because, I wasn't a dumb kid, and I wasn't not paying attention. I had a medical issue, and I couldn't hear her. So, but I would say overall, because my kids went mostly to Catholic schools as well, and everybody had a good experience. So. But when you talk about this stuff, it's always the bad experiences that come up, right, Ralph?
Well, I don't want to bash on the Catholic, because I still respect, and I loved my Catholic upbringing. So I'll tell you about a priest here in Huntington Beach that I have a lot of respect for. I'm not going to mention his name, but him and I met together. But the interesting story about this man, he was married and had 2 children. He lost his wife to cancer. and he gave his life back to God and became a Catholic priest. And I got to tell you, this man went to University of Michigan, became an attorney. What I enjoyed his sermons, because to me, it was so much more, to me, grounded sermon because his life journey. And he really brought a whole different perspective about what it is to live a life and also now be a priest and give a sermon from his life experience. And it truly, I think it gave me confidence back into the Catholic Church because of his position and also his faith and also his love for his wife, that he never remarried, but he married back into God.
Yeah. And no, you're right. And so mine is totally positive. I just that one little thing, and I didn't even pay attention to it because that's just the way it was, I guess. Yeah. So, but the interesting thing about, like I said, this movie is we're actually really talking about two organizations, although it's focused mostly on one, and that is the church. But it's really the corruption of the LAPD as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, Pat, during that time, my uncle was a really big historian with LAPD because he loved LAPD so much, just like I love the sheriff's department. My uncle learned so much about, during the late 40s and 50s, the corruption of vice and narcotics, just like with the sheriff's department. And that's the reason why Biscaloo's brought in Peter J. Pitches. But during that time, there was so much corruption and payoffs and, kickbacks and stuff. And, like even when Duvall walked into that private club for go over lunch, the maitre d' said, well, we have too many reservations today. And he said, no, I'm here with my brother, Monsignor, Desmond. And then he let him in, because probably what they did at that time, let detectives go in, eat on the cuff, which would mean for free. Right. And so that was corrected. But the corruption was immense during that time in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah. So and it's interesting because you don't know the background of the, unless you know the history of you don't really understand that background between. Now I have to talk a little bit. I did look up the actress who played the victim here, and it's a sad story. She was as Missy Cleveland was the Playmate of the Month in 1979, and she died of a drug overdose. A very, very sad thing, right? At 41, so really young age. And that's the underbelly. It's funny, we talk about the underbelly of Hollywood, right? And because Hugh Hefner, relocated from Chicago to LA, right? And so she would have been 79, and she would have been out here with him. And there's this huge underbelly of sex and drugs in Hollywood. And prostitution, and that's what you see in this movie as well. And of course, it got her in real life, right? It got her, the Missy Cleveland, in real life. Now, I got to talk a little bit about the Monsignor rank. It's an interesting story because I asked my uncle about it. I go, "What's up with the whole Monsignor rank stuff?" And he said, that's typically an honorary position that are given to senior pastors. But it doesn't really hold any authority in the church, but it's to honor all those folks who've done a good job and served a long time. And he said, and he said something interesting. He says, however, you'll see it bestowed on younger priests who are ambitious and hold powerful positions, which is exactly what you see in this movie. He's a Monsignor, but he's really very young, and it's really about the position he holds that this is bestowed on him, as appreciation. And if you look at his age, it's a limited amount of work in comparison to, say, Burgess Meredith and his tenure as a priest and others. But I just think that did you know that about the Monsignor rank or honorary rank? Really, it's kind of like a Commodore, I guess, in the Navy. It's just more honorary than substantive, but also that. Generally it's bestowed on older priests, but here we go, but we have ambitious young priests that get it early and strive to get it like it means something, right?
Thank you for explaining that and that explanation, Pat. I appreciate it. But Pat, as I related to with us in our department, it's like when a lieutenant becomes an aide to an assistant sheriff. and everybody all of a sudden, even other lieutenants walk around, around this lieutenant as, oh my God, this person's got, influence and stuff. So I hear what you're saying. I didn't know that. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, so we got Gamut talked about the 1940s footage is stunning. I have to say, the 1940s police cars, LAPD cars. I thought that was all cool. And how do you replicate this stuff? And you got to go back to the prop room. Have you ever been into one of the prop rooms, Ralph, at all? And
yeah, Paramount Studios, and
yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. I was down there one time when I was a gang lieutenant. I had to go down there, and I saw it, and it was just, I love it. And then I was telling my wife, we were watching the movie last night, where do they store all these cars? Well, they do store them, and they resurrect, and even the people who work on them I got to give them credit, and how they keep them pristine.
Yeah, it's and then they recreated, and there are, we see it. I did look for locations. What were the locations they filmed in here in LA? And
on Alameda, Vantage Street,
Alameda,
Union Station. It looked like the hills of East LA. One of them looked like to me. And then they said they went to El Segundo, but I don't think it was El Segundo they went to. I think they went to up in San Pedro, where they said that near the end, El Segundo military base. I think they went up to San Pedro, where there's a bases up there. We did some training up there one time, and they had a lot of these like barracks. And so I think that's where they filmed that at.
Yeah, they got Echo Park, Olivera Street, which we're all familiar with. Union Station, which is a mainstay if they're filming in the 40s. Got to go there. Beautiful. I worked there for, almost 10 years. My office was right outside Union Station. I used to love just go out of my office and go to the old part of Union Station and just have a cup of coffee. They have a couple nice restaurants there now. It's really great. I got, let's see, King Edward Hotel. I don't know where that's at. And the Palomar Hotel. And El Verano High School. So they obviously they picked the location. And the interesting thing, like, remember the shot where so it was the body shot. They got the body and they do a long shot, right? And you can see the long shot, and it's in the hills. It looks like it might have been East LA, but they had the old houses, right, that looked like they were from the 40s, and then they peppered cars from the 40s there, and then you can just see the whole shot, and that's probably vintage 1940s LA that they had to recreate, which is kind of interesting how they do when they do these period pieces, how they do that.
Yeah.
And I will say that I think they did a great. I didn't look to see if they got any awards on this movie, but they did a great job with the.
I agree with you, Pat. I thought they did a great job. To me, it was very realistic, and it brought you back to that time and place.
Yeah, and here's our the sloppy tie, the short fat ties. I don't know if I could get into that that kind of look. But
that scene with that lady there, and she, what are you good at? Because I'm good at French.
Well, it's also we get it's when in that restaurant. I think it went by already where. Duvall's character Tom confronts Jack Armstrong, who is, if we haven't clarified, Jack Armstrong is Charles Durning. He plays Jack Armstrong, and he's the wealthy, I would say industrialist, but it sounds like he's more of a builder. But he's got money, giving money to the church, and got contracts with the church, and obviously he's like the powerful. In my parish, there were certain people that were very wealthy and always donated, right? And so they got on all the kid minis and all that other stuff. And this is the parish where we raised our kids at, and they went to school there. And, because by virtue of my position and rank and stuff, I always was treated deferentially, but there's a difference between somebody might have a title and somebody who has money, right? The doors are open, and, and we were working on doing some stuff around the parish, and there was a guy who was really good at construction. He owned his own construction company, and he was trying to do the bid for less. But the archdiocese had a relationship with long-term construction companies. I won't say the names, and they went with the long-term, even though it was significantly more. So, because that guy probably had been giving to the church forever, so they got the bid, right? And so it's just it's played out even today, right? But yeah, money talks in the church, right?
Well, quid pro quo. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what basically it is. You scratch my back, I scratch your back, and that's what basically this movie talks about between Dez and Jack Amsterdam, and and how that all evolved, and finally they cut him loose because the embassy said no more.
So here, the scene is, it probably already passed, so I got to talk about it because I got to get both your thoughts on this. So Jack Amsterdam, Tom and Des are having lunch, and Jack Amsterdam approaches them, talks to Des about business, and who's this? This Tom talks to him, and Tom lays him out and says, "Yeah, I used to work for you when you were running whores." Laying out, and don't pretend like you're somebody to me. That was Tom, a shot across the bow kind of thing, right? And this is where Des begins to have his moral questioning, right? And
Come to Jesus.
what doesn't happen in that scene, which is as powerful as something happened, is he does not reproach Tom. He doesn't reproach him at all. He doesn't say, "Hey, this guy's a powerful guy. He gives money to the church. Knock it off, Tom." He doesn't do that at all. Now, if that is that because morally he's wrong, or Tom's the older brother, we don't really know that for sure. That's for your interpretation. But I thought that was pretty powerful. That happened, and he does not reproach Tom at all.
I agree with you, Pat, and I also believe that as the scenes evolved, that Tom went into the confession booth and apologized to his brother, embarrassing him.
Yeah.
I believe that Des didn't want to continue blowing that scene up, making that confrontation evolve even more so, because he knows Tom's temper. And even Tom said that in the confession booth. So I think he just wanted to let it go away. And I got to give the way they wrote that, maybe also was Dez's love for his brother, and probably knowing his brother was right, did not want to elaborate on that anymore. So it was I thought that was a very important scene. And then later on, I don't, if you don't mind, I mean,
go ahead.
The Layman's Award, and when Tom walked up to Jack Amsterdam and ripped that sash off his chest and went at him, because now Tom's getting so angry. The more he believed that Jack was responsible for this young lady's death in some manner, so here we go again. And Dez knew at that moment in time Dez was going to be in a pickle, because he was in a car that picked up that young lady at one point with somebody else, the other rich influencer. So it's really interesting how that all came about and evolved, which I like the way that the director brought that about, though, in steps.
Yeah, and the fact that they didn't say that they didn't say that they didn't create a situation where Des had relationships with her, right? They just said that Des met her and was introduced to her, that can happen all the time, right?
Well, it's funny you say that. So the other gentleman, who by the actor named Ed Flander, was in the back of the church with Des. He's folding up some of his uniform, and he said, "Yeah, but I didn't fuck her."
Yeah, I know, and that I think that was, and that's where it's kind of like Des is thinking, yeah, I didn't go that far, right? But you're still, you know what I mean? You know what's going on, and you're interacting with men who do this, and of course the title is True Confessions.
Right.
And then they go and they're buying their indulgence, and they go and get absolution from you, which is actually what we're talking about. I should pull up the definition of indulgences, but what do you think?
This
go ahead.
Technically hadn't made anything wrong, anything illegal, anything criminal, but
morally,
yeah, he's doing business with people that at first, I don't want to say that he knows they are corrupt, but he knows there is something that is not completely right, and he chooses to look the other way until his brother lays it down to him. So it's this and this and that. So he say, yeah, that is why what he says, when the cop brother says to him, I don't care if you go down with them, and he says, neither do I.
Yeah.
Well, Martine, I think, what it came out near the end was that Dez said, Tommy boy, you were my salvation.
Yeah.
You were my salvation. Tom was the essence of, at this point in time, the all good, and where Dez was associating with all the bad.
Yeah. It's interesting because Burgess Meredith's character was telling him, you're going down the wrong path.
Mm-hmm.
It's your pride and your ambitious are in the way. That is not what a priest should be, right? And so he was getting messages from another mentor, but he wasn't listening to it.
But Pat, he didn't listen to it. He didn't listen to it because the eminence was putting pressure on him and removing Burgess Meredith, and that was the alter ego to keep Dez maybe in line. But Dez was, he was drugged with power.
Yeah. I think we got. Gambit mentioned it. These are two pretty good performances from Dez and Robert Duvall in this thing, supported by a bunch of great character actors, right? So this is some good stuff.
Can I share my Duvall story with you guys?
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
So Martine and Pat and audience. In 1987 of February, I was a training officer at Carson Station. And, I would always have my trainees go for a 6-mile run before shift and day shift. So we're in a shower, and I hear these girls' voices in the Carson Station in the locker room. And I put my head out the shower, and there's Dennis Hopper and Robert Duvall and these two ladies taking notes. So, they leave. They get, sorry, deputy. They leave, and I'm in front of my locker. And Robert Duvall walks up to me, such a gentleman, and he goes, "Deputy, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, I didn't have my uniform shirt on, and I just sit up and I shake his hand, and he goes, "Hey, listen, if you get done early, let's have dinner at the back of the station," because I had all the food trucks. I couldn't wait to get off the end of shift, and I get done about 3:00, 3:30, and I'm in uniform, and he's sitting there waiting for me, and he waves over to me, "Come on over." And we sat and had dinner, great food, talking about what it is to be a cop, number one. Number two, I'm clipping off, what was it like to play Boo? What was it like to be in the movie Bullet as the taxi cab driver? What about the Godfather movie? And here is two men, and this is why I told my wife when he died, I got choked up, because for a man like him and his status to be so genuine to a young deputy at that time and having this conversation. And on top of it, I threw out to him about the fact my wife's cousin was Joe Lombardi that did all the special effects for Godfather 1 and Godfather 2. And he goes, that's relative? I said, not my relative, my wife's, because my wife's mother's maiden name was Lombardi. And he was telling stories about how Joe put all the explosives on James Caan's body. And James Caan was so upset afterward because it blew up, but James Caan's private parts got all swollen because it affected him. and we're laughing about it. But, audience, it was just if we only had a cell phone like we have now to document that, but it was just, my memory is so vivid of a man who gave so much of himself to a young deputy sheriff to have that moment in time a real great engagement.
I think when you look at some of these actors, like Robert Duvall, who, they're focused on their craft, that's what he primarily focused on. You don't see a lot of other activities, political or otherwise. What I see is people who strive to get at the top of their game and stay there, right? I mean, it's not easy. I worked Hollywood for 11 years of my career. There are a lot of people who come to Hollywood and leave Hollywood and never get a part. They don't get anything, right? And here it is, this guy. And you can say that with Robert De Niro too, although he has other side interests. But Duvall was just focused on, I think he's one of those guys, regardless of what profession you're in, who strove to provide excellence, as is Burgess Meredith here, to provide excellence in his craft. And I think that's why you look at a guy like him and you have respect, right? So,
what he also said to me, and I always use this all the time, Pat. He said, I became a student of my career.
yeah.
And so when people say to me, hey, Ralph, you worked in Central America, Mexico, you got an expert. I go, no, I'm not an expert. And I stole this, I should say, or borrowed it from Robert Duvall. I'm a student of the game. And, and because when you say you're an expert, sometimes some people I've seen who say they're experts, they can become a little bit over their skis or become
yeah. No, you're right. It's interesting because I just use that word just to be descriptive, but there's a great study I was listening to National Public Radio, and they talked about experts. And they said, are experts really experts? And so they did a study to see if experts are actually right. And what they found is when you label somebody an expert, they get autocratic, they get rigid, and they become less open to suggestions, right?
I agree.
And
because they are the one who really knows.
Yes.
Everybody else should shut up.
I worked for somebody in custody. I think you know who she is. And they called her the expert, but she was wrong. And it caused so much conflict because I didn't count myself as really an expert, but I was very good at implementing public policy. And I knew it. And I knew how to understand policy and how to get things done. But they referred to this person as the expert. And as you dug into her stuff, she's just wrong. But rigid, autocratic, but that's not the only person. I ran into that my whole career, and so I always, when somebody said to me once, "Well, you're an expert," I go, "Well, I'm good at what I do, right? Because I take the time to try and understand what we're trying to do and trying to get done." But yeah, right. They get rigid. That it's interesting. It's like almost like we just talked about. Give somebody power, right? And how do they handle it? Actually, when you're labeling somebody an expert, you're giving them influence. And how do they handle it? Do they constantly question their expertise and improve their tradecraft? The good people do. Good people do, right? They're students of it, right? That's what you talked about. That's a good person doing that. But some people, once they get the label, they get very rigid and almost off-putting.
Well, look at what we're looking at right now with Nancy Guthrie, with all these experts on all the different media, and something. I love to hear them all because I love to hear different viewpoints of it. But the media people say, oh, Jimmy Jones is an expert on this and that and stuff, and forensic person, FBI, this and that, and yeah, they're probably great at all they do. But the only people, I always say this when I was with gangs and narcotics, the only people that really know what's going on are truly the investigators. They're the ones that know what's going on with that case in point in time. They're the ones that know the ins and outs.
If they're allowed to. I mean, I've been asked about that case, and I said, I saw that video, and he just looks like a hot prowl burglar to me. I think this is a local criminal. This thing's got bad. You should look at the parolees, probationers, people have been released from prison that do these kind of things. That's what I thought. I was thinking the Night Stalker, who started out as a night prowl burglar and a hot prowl burglar is what they call them, and then graduated to rape and murder and that kind of stuff. It just seems to me that's where that case is going. But that's just based on experience working the streets. But here we are. So where is this, Ralph? Is this Echo?
Yeah, my wife asked me that, Pat, and I thought maybe it was MacArthur Park, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Pat. I'm not sure.
Okay, so we got to catch up on the movie. So we've had so they're investigating it. Did you see them when they used the reverse directory, Ralph?
I did.
You remember that? Remember the reverse directories?
Yeah.
You want to explain what they are to the audience?
Well, you get a number, and you look at you pull out these books they used to give us, and archaic, and looking to see what matches up with a number to a name and an address and stuff like that. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work and investigative, time to drill down. Where now all you have to do is put it in a phone and there it is. So during our period, or even our period, Pat, when we came on, I remember detectives using that all the time back at Carson Station. Even homicide guys. So it is what it is. This shows you how we progressed with crime investigations.
Yeah, you get these big books, and so you get a number, and you plug the number, and then that gives you the name and an address, the reverse directory. So instead of looking up the name to get the number, you're looking up the number to get the name.
The name.
And it's not, obviously they're not always accurate. They got to get updated and that kind of thing. But I saw that, I go, oh God, I remember when I first started, they had those, the reverse directory.
Exactly.
Now everything's online. Just run it, and it gives you a name. And but I thought that was funny. And I think this is the big ceremony where he attacks him that's Catholic Layman of the Year. Jack Amsterdam. Now, what Duvall's character is finding out, what Tom is finding out, is that our victim had a very good-looking gal, had been kind of passed around by the political elite in the city, right? They were using her, taking advantage of her, kind of a la Epstein a little bit there, right? And that she had been used, or she had been in a film as well. So she had been in a porno film, which was very underground in the 40s, right? Very underground, not mainstream, bad stuff. I think you went to jail for doing that stuff back then. So it was very underground, and that the filmmaker had connections with Jack Armstrong, Tom, the guy the lawyer that was friends with Dez. I forget his name now, but God, we had him in here. Where's he at? Let's see here.
What, Ed Flander?
Yeah, it was Ed Flander's character. So and they all were connected, and they kind of passed her around, and I think Tom, this is a guy who used to get money from the whorehouses and give it to Jack.
The bag man.
A bag man, and now he's struggling with that. He's struggling with that. And it's funny because as you go on in life, something that was once acceptable and your own, and this is where so these guys are all raised Catholics, right? They visited their mom. Good Catholic boys visit her mom and she's sick. And she comments on him. She loves him, and they're dealing with the fact that they're in this corrupt city, with just depths of corruption. And how do they come out and salvage themselves, right? And Tom is dealing with that. He's in a corrupt organization. He's seeing this murder. It is disturbing his sensibilities. He's seeing a lot of rich people who are getting accolades and seen as the elites, engaging in despicable behavior, and it's having an impact. And he's one of them to some degree, right? And he's choosing to go in a different direction. Not like now, because porn is commercially available, but in the 1940s and the years that became for the period, making porn films was very close to off limits. Yeah, it was, and that would have probably got you federal charges, I think, back in the day, right? And so that's why it was very underground. So here we go. We mix corrupt police, corrupt church, and then pornography and prostitution all in together. It makes for a good story. But Tom is having his moral dilemma, right? He's choosing, because here's the thing about sinners, right? You don't always have to be a sinner, right? You can seek redemption, but the first thing about seeking redemption is what do they say? Tend your own garden, clean your own house, and take care of yourself first. And we're seeing Tom, working through his feelings, and he's gonna his redemption is he's gonna act as a cop. He's gonna do the right thing, and he's gonna try and do the right thing by this girl. Now, I think he thinks that obviously Jack is the murderer, and he's got this preconceived notion. I think they ultimately figure out that it's not Jack, but that Jack Armstrong and this guy, they all pass this gal around. And so I don't know, it's good. Tom, you see Tom evolving, right? You see Tom blooming as a moral character, right?
I think Tom has literally seen Jesus, and Tom Tom was fed up with his behavior, and then also I think what really forced his hand to go after Jack Amsterdam was after he went to the coroner's and with his partner Frank to see Brenda, who was dead, who I believe she killed herself. She killed, and
well, that's what they say, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, in his mind, he might have thought maybe Brenda was killed by Jack because he's trying to clean the slate of any witnesses against himself, Jack. You know, so I think what happened is when Tom said to his partner and told his brother, "I don't care who I take down.
Yep.
I'm going to take this guy down." And then when he found out where the location was at the El Segundo military base, when he saw the blood in the bathtub, in the shower, and then found the note that Jack wrote to the guy Standard. You remember the note?
Yeah.
That he said, "Yeah, this is a great girl," and stuff, but also something at the bottom. It's almost like trying to separate himself from this incident, Jack. So that was in the mind of Tom, that he had to go after him to arrest him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so actually Standard was dead at this time, right?
Right. But they defined that he was dead. His time of her death was before his death.
Right. So I think that the pathway is they believe that Standard killed her, right?
Yes.
And then he was killed by somebody else, right?
Right.
And likely with this group, right? Because they're all powerful people, to kind of close the loop here, get us out of this thing, right?
Right.
And and Jack realizes that his killer is dead. The killer of the girl is dead, but he's still going to take him down. He's going to show him. He's going to he's going to show the hypocrisy, which is the word I'm searching for, right? He's going to show that these guys are all hypocrites, right? And that's, I did have the definition of indulgence up just because it's so in the Catholic Church, an indulgence is a remission of temporal punishment due to sins that have already been forgiven. So you get the indulgence and then you can commit the sins, is the way I'm reading this. Reducing the purification need for effects of sin. So as a Catholic, you understand what I'm talking about, Ralph. Either in life or in purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
So
prepaid forgiveness. Okay.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly prepaid forgiveness. So you get the prepaid card, right? And they are not forgiveness of sins, but rather a removal of the remaining penalty. There are two types: plenary removes all punishment, and partial removes part. So that's indulgence, right? That used to be basically sold by the Catholic Church before the Reformation, but we still see that kind of happening in the movie, which is, I'm a history buff, so I like all this stuff, and I read up on the Reformation, not surprisingly, and so that's how I saw this as the theme in this thing. But so Tom becomes this. He's almost like Confidential, L.A. Confidential, and what's White, Officer White. What's his name?
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe's character. He becomes, this avenging angel for
knight in shining armor.
Yes, for these women who are being abused by these very wealthy people, and he's going to expose them, and he's actually going to expose them for the right reason. Russell Crowe's character versus our other guy who was in that movie, who was a very ambitious guy who went out, Huxley, I think his name was Huxley. Yeah, and so you see kind of this similar theme, and so Robert Duvall's character is very much like White in L.A. Confidential, and he's doing it because it's the right thing to do, and he doesn't care if it hurts him, doesn't care if it hurts his brother, and he doesn't care who gets taken down by it, or if the church is hurt by it. So, what do you think, Martine? Very similar theme, right? Remember L.A. Confidential? Yeah.
Yep.
And they use the same cars. So in the movie. So here's our gal, and here's some of the notes on her. And they do, and it's interesting that they do end up having to talk to the black actress again, because she was in the film, and she kind of breaks it open for a little bit, and they find the murder scene. That's exactly when he saw that, I go, okay, he found the murder scene, right? That's clearly I think this is him going to El Segundo now, right?
Yeah.
And and you see the amount of blood, the fact that it was all in the tub, and you go, okay, that's where the dissection happened at this place. And first thing nowadays, and probably then, it just wasn't for dramatic impact. First thing you do is get on the phone and get troops there to block that thing off for forensic evidence.
Forensics, yeah.
Yeah, and said he starts to root around in it already. Of course, he may not have had a warrant, which is different. We got to talk about that a little bit, Ralph. So this is the 40s, right? This is before Escobedo. Miranda.
Yeah.
Earlier he's in a chase, and he shoots at somebody who's running away. So you can shoot at somebody that you think is a danger to the public, a fleeing felon, right? So a lot of things that we can't do today, you see going on here, right?
Exactly.
And so him going in there, actually, I don't know what the laws were back then. We still had the Fourth Amendment, as I got my handy dandy little Constitution here, right? There we go. So I use it on my other show when we're talking about. I'll go right here, read the Constitution, then we'll talk about the issue. But yeah, pre-CSI, or at least James. Thank you, James. Pre-CSI, and they did still have forensics back then, though. I think a fingerprint technology had. It wasn't quite super advanced, but they were using it, because that was, I think, at the turn of the previous century, they started using fingerprints, right? And I want to say they started in France, but so they did have some, and they could type blood, right? And that could help narrow things down. But still, you're going to take pictures. You take a lot of pictures. Those are very instructive. So there's still a lot of things they did in the 40s. But here's the blood, and you definitely this is the murder scene, right, Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you talk about search warrants. In our time right now, if I got that information, I would have wrote a warrant to get into that building and justify why I believe there's going to be evidence of a murder. Would have to, as a affiant, I would have to lay that all out. And he got his crowbar to snap the thing. Well, right there. For today, you lose a case because what was the emergency to go into that building? It's not. There's no. But the body's dead. It's gone. Yeah. The furtherance of the investigation, to save the investigation, to save the case, you would want to get a warrant. But back then, even though you're right, the Fourth Amendment. But guess what? The latitude of giving police the benefit of the doubt back then, it was much more greater wide vision than today. So that's why he did that, and he should have got on the radio and said, "Hey, bring me photographers, or people take photographs, or somebody to check out, for fingerprints, or type the blood typing. Maybe there's blood typing of Jack Amsterdam, or maybe blood typing he might got cut, from standard, and stuff like that. So they could have done that, but it's a whole different ballgame compared to this today.
I will say, just from what we know.
There's the letter. There's the letter right there.
There's the letter. But just what we know leading up to this, he did have sufficient probable cause to get a warrant to go in there, because he had
absolutely
a gal. This is where the porno film happened. It's likely related.
Yes.
There's more than enough information to crank out a warrant to go and do it legally, but sometimes legally it wasn't fast enough, right?
But they didn't, but they didn't do that back then as much.
No,
I mean, they didn't. And the cases held up most of the
time.
They
had an attitude that there was a concept in the law, if I remember correctly. Would you have gotten there legally, right? Where they would look at, okay, so he didn't get a warrant, but did he have enough for a warrant?
Yeah.
There's a concept that they used to say in the law, but it was good enough, right? Good enough, because he had enough for the warrant, even though he didn't go through the process of the warrant. So had he followed the right path, he'd have been able to get in there, and the evidence would not have been suppressed. So, but yeah, it's interesting. But it also makes for good movie making. Just get the crowbar out. But that's what people think cops are doing today. It's just not happening. And I always say, there's no reason to cheat on this stuff, because what, if he's a crook, you're going to get him some other way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Pat, you and I both, when I was
inevitable discovery. There you go. That's the concept. Inevitable discovery. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alpha. Thank you.
But even today, I always told my investigators, go the extra route to write the warrant. Don't go with consent. they could always reverse that consent in court, or their attorney, that they were coerced and stuff, because you get the warrant, and guess what? The judge gives you that latitude to get whatever you need in there, as long as you articulate all the potential evidence that you're looking for. So, I think that today's day and age, the cops are a lot more smarter in that.
Yeah.
And I think they're much more prepared. And guess what? It's not like it was when I was growing up in the sheriff's department. It was like a big mystery about putting a warrant together. This day and age, I remember, being a lieutenant, even a sergeant, they were knocking warrants out left and right, because I think we trained better about that.
I think we even learned with exigent circumstance. Now, we didn't have exigent circumstance here because we didn't know in this case that it's just the crime scene, right? But the risk of it being damaged, I guess, would be the exigency. But even when you have exigent circumstances, we are now taught to, if you have time, to continue to start the warrant process. So as somebody talked about inevitable discovery. So if I have exigent circumstances, but I also, because actually when the SWAT team rolls up now, somebody's writing a warrant at the same time. So
Absolutely.
You're using dual paths here. One is the exigent circumstances where you have to deal with a problem as it's arising, but as you're negotiating and planning, you're also simultaneously writing the search warrant so that you can show due diligence, right? That you're trying to do it with a warrant. And you're going down both paths. So if you face that challenge in court, you still have the broad broad behavior that you're engaging in, where you're using both paths to get into the house, and the judge can look at that and say, well, it was inevitable. They were writing the search warrant anyways. Let's see. I wait the cases being thrown out because some cop decided to use AI. That's coming. I think
that's coming.
Yeah, it might already be here. I mean, I'll admit I use AI tools for my research for my show, but the great thing about a lot of the AI tools, at least the ones Google or whatever, is they give you the source, and then I can go to the source and I can read the source and I can see if the source is credible. So you have to do that due diligence. Otherwise, you look like an idiot when it gets proved wrong, right? So I try to do the due diligence, and essentially I got challenged on some stuff. And they say, what's your source? And I said, here's the government agency. Well, why do you believe the government agency? I go, well, there has to be, unless you can show that they're knowingly lying, you do have government. Most sources are considered relatively reliable, but then that's the issue. Then it's so, but I don't know. I'm using AI to do my research, and it just helps me to go quicker, but I have to double check my sources.
Hey, Pat, you brought up the SWAT team, and just want to address this for the audience and stuff. As the investigators write a warrant or arrest warrant, have a Ramey warrant for somebody, but we also have to get a warrant for the SWAT team to be able to get into the house, because it may not be his house, the suspect's house. So then you got to write a Stiegel warrant. A Stiegel warrant means that it's not Pat's house. It's the suspect. It's somebody else's house he got into. So you have to write that warrant for that house, even though it's not Pat Jordan's home. He's a suspect, and so there's a lot of different things that you got to do. But SCB doesn't go in anymore. The SWAT team doesn't go in anymore unless you have a warrant for location.
Well, unless they're screaming, yelling, and shooting, right? Unless it's active and hot. Yeah.
Unless it's a life danger situation.
Yeah. So they, but and that's good policy. But that wasn't always the case, Ralph. When I first started, they weren't doing that. That became, I want to say it was in the 90s that they started doing that. And
yes.
But we did have a comment. I just watched a case from Massachusetts. The cop, I heard, said, we'll take all the phones and write the warrants later. It's interesting, the cell phone information and how that is helping to solve crimes is huge. And so if you have principals that you think are involved and you seize the phone, you still need probable cause, to take them, and you need probable cause to get obviously get the warrants to look at the data on the phones. But it's just it's interesting. It's if you do a cell phone search, like in this case, if they had cell phones, it'd be like, well, where did Jack Amsterdam go? Where was he at? Was he in the same place with this gal? Because everybody would have a phone. and you're looking for that to connect it, and it's amazing how much people are so attached to their phone, and that is what's killing them in the court. Not only that they have their phone with them, but if somebody has a phone constantly with them, and then suddenly for the time period that the crime was committed, they don't have a phone and it's all turned off, that is almost as damning, right? So
Well,
cell phone evidence is huge these days, depending on the crime. Well, on just about any crime that you look at.
Well, you're right. And then what they do, they triangulate.
Yeah.
Where was Ralph Ornelas in comparison to the crime? And the FBI has got such great technology tools for investigations out more than ever before. Evolved, last 10 years when I retired from the sheriff, it's evolved so much more now. I mean, look what they're doing right now with Nancy Guthrie case.
Yeah. What were all the cell phones in the area? They did this with the Charlie Kirk case. They did it in J6.
Yeah.
Who was there and track who they had connections with, and they could do all that stuff. And it's obviously we don't want it abused, but and people will say this is a violation. But if they could look at the Guthrie case. Who's there at that? Who's on that block? Just the people who live there. So what you do is you're looking at all the phones, who lived there and who doesn't live there that was there. I mean, that's like that. That's more than a dividing rod, right? That's he's probably the guy, which is interesting. It's but then of course you can shut your cell phone off too, which if you're an experienced criminal and you have no connection to Guthrie and then you do the crime, then it makes it a lot harder for them to get there. Let's see. A number of lawyers have been sanctioned and a few cases dismissed already because the lawyer is using AI in court. Found fake citations and errors. Yeah, that's why you have to look at the site. You have to look at what they're producing. And I just did one on, I'm going to do a show tomorrow on elder parole in California, which is crazy. They just let out a guy who sexually abused 7 kids, all under the age of 7. The last victim was 3 years old. Kidnapped, sexually abused. He got like hundreds and hundreds of years in jail, and they're letting him out on this elder parole thing. And
Pat, I didn't interrupt you, but it's AB 109 and Prop 57 that did this. And when Jerry Brown advocated for Prop 57 and even AB 109, they said they were doing a due diligence to look into the history of the suspects or whoever's that violence. And they sliced and diced what violence is, and they let out these people.
Yeah, they're going to face their moral dilemma sooner or later here because, the other thing they're doing is something that, in my background, I'm familiar with, is programming for inmates for reducing recidivism. I believe quality program can have an impact, but I don't believe, given how I watch the state, that they're competent enough to implement quality programming to guarantee that the people aren't going to recidivate. And, what they do is they'll give that programming in prison and say, oh, they've been through all the programs, so they're cured. And there's, if you actually look at the numbers, and they only had on their dashboard on CDCR yesterday as they looked back to 2025 or no 2020. So they don't even have current data. 68% of those released after 3 years in prison have been rearrested, right? And and they play the game with the recidivism. What counts as recidivism? I go there. If the guy's in the life and getting arrested, that's recidivating. Whether they're convicted or not is immaterial to me. And it used to be 75%, so it's come down. But given our pullback on a lot of laws and our defunding the police and people like Gascon, 25% of the population of California lives in LA County. He didn't really prosecute any for 4 years. 75%. Yeah, it's still the last I looked, I want to say it was 65%. It's gonna be on my show tomorrow. So it's still a high number, right? And they're releasing these folks. And so I'm going to address that because I do think there's 2 reasons why you put people in prison. One is to keep the community safe, to keep them away from the community. And the second one is punishment. And the argument of the left or do-gooders is when somebody's aged out, meaning they're over 50, they're less likely to commit a crime. And that is true. The data does show that. But you know what? It doesn't matter when it comes to, I think, somebody who kidnaps and rapes children under the age of 7. I'm sorry. Their punishment is life. So let's give them life. That's what the judge gave them. Why we let them out? That one's a no-brainer to me. And but that's where we're at. But hey, on the show, I one of the things I wanted to talk about, and as you watch the dark themes in the movie, you see that they're in kind of the dark rectory, or the residence where the the cardinal lived, or even in church. There's a lot of darkness in how the scenes are shot, and then when you're in the old Mexican style church in the desert, it's light and it's open and it's airy, and the window the windows open and a little breeze coming through, and even though it's a desolate place, it's brighter and lighter, and I just see the difference between how they do the shooting when they're presenting the dark theme, and now they're presenting, even though we're in this barren place, it everything's better and lighter because we found the right path, right? And they show that in the film. Did you notice that, how they do that when they're addressing that they've recognized their shortcomings, and they're proving themselves, it's almost like the Enlightenment, right? After Martin Luther called out the church for its indulgences and all the bad things it did, it created an enlightenment, the Enlightenment movement, where we started looking at people as the foundation of the church, and human rights and civil rights and all other stuff, and we became very much more enlightened. But you see it in the film in darkness and light. Did you notice that, Ralph?
No, I did. I mean, let's face it. Any type of church I was in Brooklyn, it was always dark and dark, heavy wood, like you saw.
Yeah,
you know. And but also, I think that to me was always about, looking back at it now as a older man, looking back, was about the seriousness of the Catholic Church, the influence of the Catholic Church, the
power.
The power. That's the word I was looking at. The power of the Catholic Church, and then you go to Palm Springs. I believe that, here you are now. He's at the end of his life, and the lights open. It's white. It's brighter, and guess what? He's seeing. It's almost like he's seeing the clarity of his life, and that's why he said he was at peace with his life. And he said to his brother, "You are my salvation, Tom." And so I think that the director wanted to add that light glowing, even with the cemetery in the background, that this is what his path was, and he's okay with it.
Yeah, and it's I think we need to talk about Duvall's character, Tom. He did feel guilty. Yeah, he took down Jack Armstrong, who probably wasn't the killer. He took down that whole network of high-flying, influential people, and called them out for what they were. Then finished his career. He probably got sent to Vice or something, got him out of homicide. But he also took down his brother, and something for years that he probably struggled with, and he came to see his brother one last time to apologize. I mean, he already had, but and so we can't forget that this is a story about brothers too, right? And
I like the fact that after that sitting in church in Palm Springs, and they walk out, he showed Burgess Meredith his stone, and they showed him where he was going to be buried, and that engagement there was I think it was the olive branch between each other as brothers. And and I think, I can't remember. I think it was a little bit of light humor between Duvall and Tom and Des on that. And that was a kind of and I like the music behind that, because it added a little bit of motion to it.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job on that, even in the conclusion of that scene.
I think his selection of his plot indicated where he was at mentally, where he'd gone from, I'm the mover and shaker for the archdiocese, getting stuff done. I'm honored. I have a seat of power and privilege. And in the end, he accepted that, the priest's role is one that's more as the servant, pastoral, and providing guidance, and one of humility, which is, I think, the lesson he learned here, right?
Yeah.
That humility is the greater virtue than pride and power, right? And that's what when he says, "This is where I want to be buried," he's saying that I've done my penance and I'm okay with it, and I've learned what it means to be a real priest and to project the values that he thinks that a good pastor or priest should have. And so the selection was really a big deal. That was a big part of his mindset at the end of his life. So,
I also think Des gave Tom a making him feel proud of what he did on his end as a cop.
Yeah.
And I think that the collaboration, the conversation at the end was kind of like the final statement between each other as brothers, that we both did what we had to do to make it through this challenge. Yeah.
All right, Martine, same question to you. Darkness versus light. We see that in a lot of movies when they're trying to tell a story, right?
Yeah, it's a common theme, but Ralph has a point. Most big churches are dark because they have poor illumination, and that kind of little church, that is structure at the end when Des is regaining his faith, that kind of structure are better lighted. So it may be a coincidence. It may be a storytelling device. Maybe it's both.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we see it in a lot of themes. I mean, you saw a lot of darkness in L.A. Confidential, and then in the end, even though what's his name shot up, it's a bright sunny day. Huxley's going to go and get his award, and everybody's smiling and happy, right? And they dealt with their moral dilemmas. They took out the bad guys, the evil guys, and in this case, it wasn't really Jack Armstrong, and it wasn't really the lawyer there. It was it wasn't even really Stanford, because he killed. He's dead, right, already. It was they were struggling with themselves. That was the big story. It wasn't the big arrest. It was them struggling with their own conscience as who do they want to be when they face their Lord, and going into heaven, if you believe in Christian theology, and what do they want to do? What do they want to say they did, and how they lived their life? That's I think this was the struggle. This wasn't a true crime drama. This was it's almost a little. I don't know if you've seen The Bad Lieutenant, Ralph. It's so, in the end, he's struggling and the Bad Lieutenant realizes that he lived a terrible life, and in the end he lets somebody go, and he's trying to find salvation. And you see that with people who live these terrible lives. Even Copland, if you look at Copland, so Stallone's character tolerates these corrupt cops in his town, and then he finally decides nope. So this is a theme that's in a lot of movies. I think I like the whole darkness theme. You see it in The Godfather a lot, where they present the power of the families and the power of the church and these institutions that they operated in and they ran in, and a lot of them have dark themes, right? And
it's like The Godfather 3 with Michael Corleone getting an award from the Pope and whatever the title of that award is, and here is with these three gentlemen, Amsterdam and the attorney, and then the other gentleman in the locker room for the golf. Was they used the Spirit of God, in a sense, to their own life influence negatively on a negative basis. And I think that they try to redeem themselves later, and that they're so deep into it in their life that there's no return. And as Des saw it, he was complicit in advocating for so long the monies, the building of certain schools and churches and stuff. He started looking in the mirror and he didn't like what he saw, probably. And I believe a lot of criminal element. just like in the attorney in this movie, he started seeing things, and he was questioning Dez about his brother's activity, looking into it. He started getting frightened because he knew something was going to come down on him. And that's when people, criminals, or start seeing, oh my God, what did I do to myself? Just like if you read certain books, about certain mafioso members, they really, at the end, they realize it, and so, I think it's a spiritual thing at the end, but it's too late.
Yeah, it's like
It's
Jack
too,
Armstrong. I met the Pope. Jack Armstrong. One of the comments he makes. I met the Pope, for Christ's sakes. And
yeah.
I think he was in confession saying that. But I think we got some comments here. It's good guy overthrows bad guy. Power is lurking in the shadows. Yeah, a lot of um, inner demons. I think one of the comments was white hat versus black hats. You see that in the cowboy movies, right? And but here we got, this is also a time when the anti-hero kind of character.
What happened? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, the anti-hero kind of character. It's because both these guys are more Tom than anybody else. He's a corrupt guy, and he's deciding that he's going to be he's going to clean his act up and do the right thing. But yeah, so we got James. This is from Jameson. What's funny is, oh God, what's funny is when you realize that on a show like NCIS, where the cops are all heroes, half their cases would be likely thrown out for the Fourth and Fifth Amendment violations. Well, this is where movie making and TV show making just is not reality with police work. You just can't work it. You can't solve that crime in 60 minutes, and so they kind of cut corners to make it entertaining. There's a lot of time in police work that life is boring and tedious, and sometimes being a detective, if you're a good detective, it is the guy that is fastidious and tedious and detail oriented that is sometimes, many times, your best detective. You give that guy the ability to talk to people, and that's the guy that's going to solve your crimes, right? That guy, a detail oriented guy who can get the guy to talk. And it isn't the flashy guy, it isn't the loud mouth, it is that guy that is can read, understands, remember, and then use that ability to investigate that crime, but also when he sits down with the suspect or somebody who believes the suspect. Last time you sit down with people, they're not the suspect, but you got to figure that out, right? And it's a detail-oriented guy that really is what you're looking for, right, Ralph?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have somebody who's got the the personality, the mindset to engage when you're sitting across a table of a suspect has done the crime, but you have to give him kind of a way out with you, make him feel like he's so important,
Yeah.
and the fact that still there's some good in him or her, it's truly a chess game. It's a chess game, and I used to love that when interviewing people because that's where you prove your mettle to really get a statement out of the suspect because it's trying to show them that hey, I understand what you're still a good guy, and I'm here. I'm going to give you a cup of coffee or a cheeseburger, and it's like when I met Rene Box Enriquez. I brought him a pizza and a big bottle of Coca-Cola, and Walnut Station, and I needed to get information from him, and I showed him respect. I never called him by his moniker. I called him Rene, and the thing about it was that he saw that I wanted something, but I had to work toward that. So the pizza was an icebreaker. The Coca-Cola was because he liked Coca-Cola. He was a heroin addict. But guess what? The intel that we got was phenomenal from the guy.
Golden.
It's golden.
Yeah, and and I said one of the interesting scenes is the last scene we'll probably talk about, but we got to get into it is when there's two actually. Jack Armstrong is in there yelling at Des basically, but who absolves you? Who absolves you? And one of the scenes that we didn't talk about it, but Des goes and does his confession with his mentor,
Burgess Meredith.
Burgess Meredith, right? And that's who absolves you as the priest when you are violating, when you are sinning, right? That's an interesting concept, because you're right. Who does the priest go to? They go to confession too, right? And as you see in the film, and we're all sinners in the eyes of God, I think is what they say, right? And it's just at what level, and are you seeking redemption? And both these guys were seeking redemption in this movie. And but I thought that was a good line. Who absolves you? You can apply it right to the cops.
Absolutely.
Who
Absolutely.
checks you? When you're out of line. Who the hell do you think you are? I mean, that's really what he's saying. Who the hell do you think you are? We're all sinners in the eyes of God, right? So yeah, that was an interesting thing, and it's who absolves you, and in reality, it's for everybody. It's how you live your life. Your redemption will come to you, and how you live your life. Sinners are bound to do the wrong thing. Well, we're all sinners in the eyes of God, as I learned, and it's how you live your life and try to live a good life, knowing you're going to have missteps along the way. It's going to happen. And you just kind of try to stay in a certain lane and not be too bad, and then try and seek redemption, right, Ralph? We're all
It's like Des and Burgess Meredith, the cardinal put them in purgatory, and literally in the weather, hot 115 degrees, and
yeah,
and being at that church there, they were in purgatory,
yeah.
but Burgess Meredith was okay with it at the end, and so was Des, because he realized what he was involved in, and his mindset was, I deserve this, and I'm okay with this.
And sometimes your reminders that of what you're doing wrong come from people that you never expect, and that's where we hear the last line. Martine, I'll throw this one to you. You were my salvation, as Des says to Tom. You were my salvation. I got guidance from Burgess Meredith. I had all kinds of pious people around me, but it was you, my morally corrupt brother, who saw the light and drew me along with him to do the right thing. You were my salvation. What do you think of that, Martine? I caught you flat-footed, right?
What?
What?
What do you think? You were my salvation. Tom
Yeah.
decided he's the older brother too. He says, I am going a different direction, Des, and I'm dragging you along with me, even if it causes you pain. And Des finally realizes that you were my salvation. You, the once corrupt cop, showed the right way for me, the pious priest. I think that's what Des realized, right?
Yep. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I'm leaving Martine speechless here, right?
No, I love that. I love that ending, what he said to him, because I believe it alleviated all the weight and burden on Tom, everything that he felt he injured his brother's career, but it was for the right reasons. And Des gave him that blessing and those words to make him feel better about himself.
Absolution is the key word. There you go, Gambit. Absolution is the key word, and that is correct. Okay, we got a couple minutes. I just want to say, good vehicle for Robert Duvall, right? And to showing his chops as an actor. I think more so than De Niro in this one. I think Duvall was the guy who carried this film. De Niro did a great job, but I think it was Duvall. This was his movie if you had to pick the two, even though they both starred in it. What do you think, Ralph?
I totally agree with you. The only part I was really impressed with, I think anybody could have played the part of De Niro's part. The only part I was really impressed with him when he spoke in Latin in the beginning part of the church. But other than that, I believe the leading character was Duvall. I believe his personality and the manners, facial expressions, and how he responded to different characters in the whole movie was phenomenal. And like I say, I'm a little being biased because of my engagement with him.
Oh, your friendship with him, yeah.
All right.
Same question to you, Martine. Is this a better vehicle for Duvall or Robert De Niro?
Duvall, definitely.
Duvall. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, and yeah, De Niro, he's a good actor, even though I don't like his politics. He's a good actor, but this was definitely a good vehicle for Robert Duvall, and it is a good movie to honor Robert Duvall, the late Robert Duvall, somebody that had a brief friendship with their Ralph, right? And guys, I want to thank you for joining us more so than Duvall, the actor. Yeah. I want to thank all you guys who joined us on the show, Gambit, Adam, and Jameson, of course. I'll have to remember that name, and maybe I'll have to have a Jameson tonight. I got a bottle.
I'm gonna have a Jameson with my cigar.
There you go. All right. Thank you for joining us again for Morning Coffee with the Chief. Remember, you can catch me on Briefing with the Chief on YouTube. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a show on elder parole and how I think it's being misused in the state of California. And pedophiles need to stay in prison. So join me on that show. And Martine, we are finished for today. You can take it away.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Y'all come back now, you hear? Matt Damon.